The air in the control room of the Tethys Underwater Research Facility was cold. It was a manufactured cold, designed to keep the massive computer servers from overheating. Dr. Aris Thorne watched the primary display screen. On it, a creature of impossible design swam in lazy circles. He called it Specimen X. It was a fusion of life, a monster born from forbidden science. The project was codenamed Leviathan. It was the culmination of years of secret work, funded by a corporation that saw only profit in the past. They had salvaged fragmented DNA from marine reptiles, creatures that ruled the oceans when dinosaurs walked the earth. They had merged it with the genome of the great white shark, nature's perfect predator. The result was something new, something terrible and beautiful. Thorne felt a familiar mix of pride and fear. He had done what many said was impossible. He had resurrected the ghosts of the Jurassic seas. The creature on the screen was magnificent. It had the powerful, streamlined body of a shark, but its head was longer, more reptilian, filled with interlocking teeth designed to crush bone. Its skin shimmered with a strange bioluminescent pattern, a side effect of the genetic splicing. The containment pen was a marvel of engineering. It was a massive sphere of reinforced acrylic and titanium alloys, sunk deep into the seabed a mile from the main facility. High-frequency sonic emitters kept the creature docile, or so they believed. The illusion of control was a powerful drug. His lead technician, a young woman named Lena, monitored the vital signs. "Vitals are stable, Doctor," she reported. Her voice was calm, but her eyes never left the monitors. "Heart rate is steady at 40 beats per minute. Neurological activity is within expected parameters." Thorne nodded, but a knot of unease tightened in his stomach. The creature had been growing faster than their models predicted. It was also displaying intelligence they had not anticipated. It tested the sonic fence constantly, bumping against the invisible barrier with calculated force. It seemed to be learning, adapting. The corporation wanted to move to Phase 2, creating a whole school of these predators for military application. The thought sent a chill down his spine. This facility, the Tethys, was a secret buried deep beneath the waves off the coast of Costa Rica. It was not far from the infamous Isla Nublar. That proximity was a constant, unspoken warning. They were playing with the same fire that had burned down Jurassic Park. But the investors were deaf to history's lessons. They saw only the potential for unimaginable wealth and power. Thorne looked at the creature one last time before the display shifted to schematics. He saw the cold, hard numbers and lines of code. But in his mind, he saw the dark, intelligent eye of Specimen X. It was an eye that held no mercy. It held only a primal, ancient hunger. A hunger they had foolishly brought back into the world.
Perfect.
The first alarm was a low, insistent hum. It was almost lost in the ambient noise of the facility's life support systems. Lena's head snapped up from her console. "Doctor, we have a power fluctuation in the containment pen," she said, her voice sharp. On the main screen, the live feed flickered. The image of Specimen X vanished, replaced by static. Then a new alarm blared, a piercing shriek that echoed through the control room. Red lights bathed the walls in a hellish glow. A synthesized voice announced, "Warning, containment field failure. Warning." Thorne's blood ran cold. It was happening. The nightmare he had privately feared was unfolding before his eyes. Panic erupted. Technicians scrambled, shouting commands and running diagnostics. But the systems were failing one by one. The creature had been patient. It had learned the frequency of the sonic emitters. It had waited for a scheduled power diagnostic, a moment of vulnerability. It slammed its immense body against the acrylic wall. The first impact sent spiderweb cracks across the surface. The second shattered it completely. Water rushed into the observation gallery surrounding the pen. The pressure was immense. Men and women were thrown against consoles and walls as the sea reclaimed its territory. The Tethys was dying. Thorne grabbed a communications headset. "Seal the control room! Seal it now!" he yelled. The heavy titanium blast door began to slide shut, but it was too slow. A torrent of seawater surged down the corridor, carrying with it the flailing bodies of his colleagues. The door jammed, leaving a gap just wide enough for the water to pour through. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into a terrifying darkness broken only by the red emergency strobes. The control room was flooding. The water was icy cold, rising around their ankles, then their knees. The screams from the outer labs were cut off one by one, replaced by a dreadful, gurgling silence. Through the reinforced window of the control room, Thorne saw it. Specimen X swam past, a shadow of impossible size moving with terrifying speed and grace. Its bioluminescent patterns pulsed with predatory excitement. It ignored the drowning humans. It was not interested in them. It was focused on one thing: escape. It smashed through the facility's outer hull as if it were made of paper. The ocean rushed in, a final fatal blow to the dying station. Thorne clung to a console as the water rose to his chest. He had unleashed a monster, and now that monster was free in the open ocean. The age of man's dominance was over. The Jurassic Deep had risen. Dr. Ellie Sattler, now a world-renowned paleobotanist, was lecturing at a university in California. The topic was ecosystem collapse following the introduction of invasive species. She spoke of Isla Nublar and the chaos that followed. She spoke of the delicate balance of nature and the arrogance of man. After the lecture, a man in a dark suit approached her. He was from the State Department. He spoke in low, urgent tones about a communications blackout. An underwater research facility near Costa Rica had gone silent. It was a facility owned by a subsidiary of a familiar, defunct corporation, InGen. The name hit her like a physical blow, a ghost from a past she could never truly escape. Meanwhile, in the Gulf of Mexico, rescue diver Owen Grady was working on a deep-sea salvage operation. He had left the world of training raptors behind, seeking solace in the quiet solitude of the abyss. But the past had long claws. His satellite phone rang, a priority call routed through military channels. It was Alan Grant. The voice was older, wearier, but unmistakable. He told Owen about the Tethys facility. He told him about the rumors of illegal genetic research. They needed someone with his unique experience, someone who had looked into the eyes of a prehistoric predator and survived. Owen felt a familiar, unwelcome adrenaline surge. He knew this call was not a request. It was a summons back to the world of teeth and claws. Ellie and Owen met at a secure military airbase. They were strangers, but they shared a common history written in scars and nightmares. They were introduced to the mission commander, a stern man who laid out the grim situation. The Tethys was presumed lost. Their mission was to lead a rescue and recovery team. They were to assess the damage and, if possible, determine the cause of the disaster. The official story was a seismic event, but Ellie and Owen knew better. The stench of corporate malfeasance and genetic hubris was too strong. They were not going on a rescue mission. They were going on a hunt. As they boarded the advanced submersible, the Nautilus, Owen checked his gear. He had a custom-built harpoon gun and a high-frequency pulse rifle, non-lethal tech designed to disorient large marine life. Ellie reviewed the schematics of the Tethys, her mind racing. What kind of madness had they been cooking up down there? She remembered the velociraptors, their cold, calculating intelligence. What would happen if you combined that intelligence with the raw power of an apex marine predator? The thought was terrifying. They were descending into a new kind of jungle, a vertical world of crushing pressure and eternal night, and something was waiting for them in the dark. The descent in the Nautilus was a journey into another world. The bright blue of the surface faded to a deep indigo, then to a pure, impenetrable black. The only light came from the submersible's powerful exterior lamps, cutting beams through the darkness. They passed through clouds of glowing plankton and past strange alien-like fish that scattered from their path. Owen watched the sonar display, his eyes trained to spot anomalies. Ellie worked to access the Tethys facility's network logs. She was searching for a digital ghost. A final data burst sent before the station went silent. The silence of the deep was unnerving, a stark contrast to the chaos they both knew was coming. "I've got something," Ellie announced, her voice tense. "A partial data log. It's heavily corrupted, but it confirms the project name, Leviathan." She brought up fragmented files on the main screen. They saw genetic sequences, charts showing impossible growth rates, and brief, garbled video clips. One clip showed the creature in its pen. It was larger and more menacing than anything they could have imagined. Its eyes seemed to glow in the low light, watching the camera with an unnerving focus. Another clip showed the containment breach. It was a chaotic mess of alarms, shouting and shattering acrylic. The log ended with a single, chilling audio file. Dr. Thorne's last recorded words. "God help us. It's heading for Site B." "Site B?" Owen asked, looking at the commander. "What is Site B?" The commander's face was grim. "According to the corporate files we seized, Site B was InGen's original marine research outpost. It was built inside a dormant volcanic caldera on the seafloor, 30 miles north of the Tethys. It was abandoned after the first Jurassic Park incident. We thought it was decommissioned, stripped clean." Ellie's blood ran cold. "They wouldn't just abandon a fully equipped genetic lab," she said. "They would have mothballed it, left everything in place." The implication was horrifying. The monster wasn't just escaping, it was heading home. It was heading for a place where it could potentially reproduce. The Nautilus altered its course, heading towards the coordinates of the old facility. The sonar suddenly lit up. "Contact!" the pilot shouted. "Multiple contacts, moving fast!" On the screen they saw them. Smaller, faster versions of the main creature. They were like torpedoes, darting in and out of the sonar range. These were not from the Tethys. They must have been born at Site B. The main creature, the alpha, had already reached its destination and unleashed its progeny. The hunt had just begun, but they were already outnumbered. The sub's lights caught a glimpse of one of the smaller creatures as it raced by. It had the same reptilian head, the same rows of teeth. This was no longer about one monster. It was about an infestation. Site B was a skeleton on the sea floor. The abandoned InGen facility was a cluster of corroded domes and structures nestled within a massive underwater caldera. It looked like a graveyard, haunted by the ghosts of past scientific sins. Bioluminescent flora, mutated by trace chemicals leaking from the lab over the years, cast an eerie glow on the structures. As the Nautilus approached, its lights revealed evidence of recent activity. Sections of the outer hull were torn open. The damage was fresh. The alpha predator had forced its way inside, turning this forgotten relic into its personal lair, a devil's nursery in the heart of the ocean. Owen led a small team, including me, out of the Nautilus in smaller, more maneuverable submersible drones called Mantis pods. Our mission was to get inside the main dome and find the genetics lab. We needed to know what we were truly up against. The journey through the caldera was tense. The smaller hybrids darted around us like wolves, testing our defenses. They were fast and intelligent, working together to herd the pods towards the crippled main facility. It was a clear, coordinated hunting strategy. The creatures were communicating, a chilling thought that implied a level of social structure Owen had only seen before in his raptor pack. We docked with a breached airlock and entered the facility. The emergency power was still active, casting long, distorted shadows down the flooded corridors. The water was waist-deep and filled with floating debris and the gnawed remains of deep-sea creatures that had been drawn to the site. Every sound echoed, every splash of water could be a lurking predator. We moved cautiously towards the central genetics lab, our flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. I found a computer terminal that was, somehow, still functional. I worked frantically, my fingers flying across the keyboard, trying to access the old research files. The files I uncovered were more horrifying than we could have imagined. This lab was not just for storage, it was an incubator. InGen had left behind viable embryos, a cocktail of different marine reptile DNA. The alpha creature, drawn by some primal instinct, had triggered their accelerated growth using the lab's own automated systems. The computer showed dozens of gestation chambers, all of them now empty. But the most terrifying discovery was the final log entry. The hybrids were not stable. Their genetic code was degrading, causing them to mutate further. They were evolving, adapting to their new environment in unpredictable and monstrous ways. They were no longer just dinosaurs. They were becoming something else entirely. The first sign of trouble on the surface was a fishing trawler found adrift 10 miles off the coast of Costa Rica. The boat was covered in deep gashes, its hull torn open as if by a giant can opener. The crew was missing. Then came the attacks on the beaches. A surfer was pulled under the waves, his board washing ashore in 2 pieces, covered in massive bite marks. A coastal town, once a popular tourist destination, became a place of fear. The local authorities were baffled. They blamed rogue sharks, but the bite patterns matched nothing on record. A red tide of terror was washing over the shoreline, and no one knew what was causing it. The hybrids were moving towards the coast, driven by hunger and a strange instinctual pull towards the warmer, shallower waters. They were evolving rapidly. Some developed thicker armored skin, making them resistant to small arms fire from the Coast Guard patrols. Others showed enhanced bioluminescence, using it to disorient their prey in the murky coastal waters. One mutated variant was seen crawling onto a pier, using crude, flipper-like limbs to drag itself out of the water for a few terrifying moments, before sliding back into the sea. The creatures were adapting to new environments, pushing the boundaries of their original genetic programming. From the Nautilus, Ellie and Owen watched the news reports with growing horror. They had failed to contain the threat at its source. Now it was spilling out into the world. The military had established a quarantine zone around the coastal area, but it was like trying to build a fence in the ocean. The hybrids were too fast, too numerous, and too smart. They learned the patrol patterns, striking in coordinated attacks before melting back into the depths. The coastal town was under siege. Its harbor became a killing field. The once bustling marina was now a graveyard of sunken boats and broken docks. The government was preparing to use depth charges, a brute force solution that would devastate the local marine ecosystem. Ellie argued against it passionately. It was a scorched earth tactic that would cause untold collateral damage. Owen knew she was right, but they were running out of options. The alpha predator, the original Specimen X, had not yet been seen. It was the key. The smaller hybrids were a plague, but the alpha was the source. They had to draw it out. They had to end this at the head of the serpent. Their only chance was to go back to the caldera, back to the heart of the volcano and face the apex predator on its own turf. The plan was desperate, bordering on suicidal. They would use the Nautilus as bait. By overloading the submersible's power core, they could create a massive energy signature, mimicking the conditions of the Tethys facility just before the breach. It would be an irresistible lure for the Alpha. The target location was the deepest point of the caldera, a volcanic trench that vented geysers of superheated water and sulfur. It was a hellish landscape, a place of crushing pressure and extreme temperatures. It was the perfect place for a final confrontation, an arena from which only one apex predator could emerge. As the Nautilus descended into the trench, the pressure gauges climbed to critical levels. The hull groaned under the strain, the sound of tortured metal echoing through the ship. Outside, the view was apocalyptic. Towering black smokers, hydrothermal vents, spewed dark clouds of minerals into the water, creating a thick, soupy fog. The water temperature fluctuated wildly, from near freezing to boiling in a matter of seconds. This was the Alpha's throne room, a primordial environment that mirrored the ancient world from which its DNA was born. The smaller hybrids were absent here. The conditions were too extreme even for them. This was a place for kings. Ellie monitored the energy output, her face illuminated by the green glow of the console. "Core approaching critical overload," she announced, her voice steady despite the immense danger. "The energy pulse will be massive. If it's out there, it will know we're here." Owen stood at the forward viewport, peering into the murky abyss. He held the controls for a remote-operated torpedo, their only real weapon. It was armed with a custom warhead, designed not to explode, but to inject a powerful neurotoxin directly into the target. It was a one-shot weapon. If he missed, they would be defenseless. The sonar pinged. It was a single, massive contact. It was moving slowly, deliberately from the deepest part of the trench. The Alpha was coming. The bait had been taken. A profound silence fell over the bridge of the Nautilus. The crew held their breath, their eyes fixed on the forward view screen. The plan was in motion. There was no turning back now. They had descended into the heart of a volcano to fight a monster from the dawn of time. Survival was no longer the objective. The objective was to ensure that this creature, this ultimate sin of science, would never reach the surface world again. They were the last line of defense, buried at the bottom of the world. The Alpha Predator emerged from the blackness like a nightmare-given form. It was immense, far larger than the video logs had suggested. Its body was a tapestry of scars, evidence of its violent escape and its dominance over the other creatures. Its bioluminescent patterns pulsed with an angry crimson light, illuminating the sulphurous water around it. Its eyes, cold and ancient, fixed on the Nautilus. There was no simple hunger in that gaze. There was intelligence. There was malice. It recognized the technology. It recognized the trap, and it did not care. It circled the submersible slowly, a titan appraising its challenger. "Fire the torpedo!" the commander ordered. Owen's hands were steady on the controls. He tracked the creature's slow, deliberate movement, waiting for the perfect moment. He needed a clean shot at its underbelly, where its armored hide was thinnest. The Alpha suddenly lunged, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of teeth like railway spikes. It slammed into the Nautilus, and the entire submersible screamed in protest. Metal shrieked and buckled. Alarms blared as multiple hull breaches were reported. The lights flickered violently. They were taking on water, their time rapidly running out. Through the chaos, Owen saw his opening. As the creature recoiled for another strike, its soft underside was exposed. He fired the torpedo. It shot through the dark water, a silver streak heading for the monster's heart. But the Alpha was faster than it looked. It twisted its body with impossible agility. The torpedo missed its primary target, but it struck the creature's massive pectoral fin, embedding itself deep. The neurotoxin flooded its system. The Alpha let out a silent, agonized roar, thrashing wildly in the water. It was wounded, enraged, but far from dead. In its death throes, the monster turned its fury on the environment itself. It slammed its body against the unstable wall of the volcanic trench. The impact triggered a catastrophic chain reaction. The rock wall fractured and collapsed. A massive underwater landslide began, tons of rock and sediment cascading down towards them. The Alpha was consumed by the avalanche, its crimson light extinguished as it was buried under the weight of the seafloor. But the landslide was now heading directly for the crippled Nautilus. "Brace for impact!" the pilot yelled, as the world outside the viewport dissolved into a chaotic swirl of rock and darkness. It was the end. Miraculously, the Nautilus survived. Its reinforced hull, though battered and broken, held against the landslide. The submersible was half buried in silt and rock, its systems failing, its power nearly gone. There were casualties. The commander was gone, along with several members of the crew. But Owen and Ellie were alive, trapped in the wreckage at the bottom of the ocean. They were survivors of a war no one on the surface would ever know was fought. The silence that followed the chaos was absolute, a silence of the deep that felt like a tomb. They had won, but the cost was devastating. Days later, a deep-sea rescue team located the Nautilus. Owen and Ellie were brought to the surface, blinking in the unfamiliar sunlight. As they were being treated in the infirmary of the rescue ship, a medic noticed a deep gash on Ellie's arm. It was from a piece of shrapnel during the final battle. As the medic cleaned the wound, he saw something embedded in the flesh. It was a shard of tooth, a fragment from the alpha predator. He carefully removed it and placed it in a sterile biocontainer for analysis. Ellie stared at the container, a cold dread creeping into her heart. She had carried a piece of the monster back with her. The official report listed the incident as a tragic combination of a seismic event and a catastrophic failure at a private research facility. Project Leviathan was buried under layers of corporate denial and government classification. The world was told a lie to prevent a panic. But the threat was not over. In the coastal waters of Costa Rica, the surviving hybrids, now without their alpha, began to scatter. They swam out into the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, following the currents. They were leaderless, but they were adaptable. They were survivors. They were invasive species on a global scale, carrying their mutating DNA to new ecosystems. On the rescue vessel, in a secure medical lab, a scientist analyzed the tooth fragment taken from Ellie's arm. The DNA within was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was still active, still changing. A new sequence was emerging, something that was not shark, not reptile, but a terrifying synthesis of both. As Ellie looked out at the endless blue horizon, she understood the terrible truth. They had not ended the threat. They had merely cut off the head of the Hydra. And in the dark, silent depths of the world's oceans, new heads were already beginning to grow. This was not the end. It was the beginning of a new, more dangerous Jurassic Age.